Hello, everybody. Hang in there. We'll be starting at 2 minutes after. Good morning, good afternoon, folks. Just give us another minute, and we will be starting shortly. All right, folks, give us another half a minute, and we will begin shortly. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to our cloud webinar series sponsored by NetApp. This one focused on protecting your data in the hybrid cloud. My name is Lee Sinakis. I'll be your host, and I'm on our cloud business development team at NetApp, responsible for our partnership with Equinix in North America. Here's our agenda for today. For those that missed our previous webinar, I'm going to highlight where Equinix fits into NetApp's cloud strategy, and then provide a brief overview of our joint solution called NetApp Private Storage for Cloud. Jim Steinbauer from Equinix will then discuss the importance location has when developing your future data center and cloud strategies, and the impact that has on cloud vendor flexibility and application performance. We'll then talk to two of our partners about their hybrid cloud implementations and lessons they've learned throughout the process. The first is BrightSky, a Canadian managed services provider that's developed hybrid cloud services that allow their customers to leverage the public cloud and still meet the compliance and data sovereignty requirements of the Canadian Data Privacy Act. Our second, we'll hear from another one of our partners, 1901 Group, who recently implemented a hybrid cloud solution for a United States federal law enforcement agency, and it transformed their data center to be able to use and leverage cloud resources, but still maintain chain of custody of thousands of legal and criminal documents. It's really a cool use case. And then I'll bring us back to some final thoughts. A couple of logistics. One of my colleagues, Pete Deacon, will be monitoring the questions online, and you'll be able to find several documents as well as this presentation in the attachments and links section on the right-hand side. So let me start with a brief overview of NetApp's cloud strategy, which we call the Data Fabric. Data Fabric is an architecture or a blueprint that includes a set of tools, products, software, and cloud services that allow our customers to move data securely from their private clouds that are on-prem to public clouds to hybrid clouds, and most importantly, to move their data back. Our reputation was built on our on-prem storage systems that we provide customers, but also our partnerships with technology leaders like Cisco that simplify the deployment of private clouds. We also have strong partnerships with the largest hyperscalers like AWS, Azure, IBM, and Google. I don't know if you were aware, but you can get ONTAP Cloud, NetApp's storage operating system, in both AWS and Azure marketplaces. That allows our customers to run the same applications in the cloud as they have in their own data centers. And you're going to see NetApp continue to announce more data services with these big hyperscalers. And the hybrid cloud on the left represents cloud-connected colocation. and where we have our partnership with Equinix, and where we're going to have the rest of the discussion. So NetApp calls our joint solution NetApp Private Storage for Cloud, or NPS for short. And before I dive into the diagram, it's important to note that Equinix and NetApp have been working together for over 5 years developing verified architectures for NPS. Equinix calls their version of this Data Hub, and NetApp is one of their reference architectures. So essentially this involves the placement of customers' data next to the cloud in a private cabinet in an Equinix data center instead of in the cloud. And that storage array is then connected to Equinix Cloud Exchange. That's a software-defined switching fabric that allows customers to easily switch between clouds through a portal in minutes. On the other side are dedicated connections to each of the major hyperscalers, like Direct Connect for AWS and ExpressRoute for Azure. Essentially, applications use the data that's on the storage on-prem, and they use the cloud compute resources from the hyperscalers, thus hybrid cloud. What that gives our customers are these 4 main capabilities. Choice of clouds for the right workload, and also to avoid vendor lock-in. An important one is low latency between storage and compute. That's typically less than 2 milliseconds in this type of configuration, so you can actually run production applications. We're going to spend a lot of time on data security and control, so that's the rest of this presentation. And it also helps manage cloud expenses by having fixed cost, dedicated cloud connections versus usage-based pricing. And you'll see the main use cases a little bit farther to the right. DR is a good one. These all tend to be ones where having current data is important, but they're often bursty type applications, and the compute requirements go up and down. So DR, I want my data on site, so my RPO is short, but I only want to pay for the compute when I'm testing or having a disaster. Test and dev is a good one because the needs of developers change based on software releases, right? They go up and down. Data analytics is another good one, especially for Hadoop. We see customers collecting data, large amounts, hundreds of terabytes. It's got to be analyzed weekly, monthly, and they use those compute resources in the cloud. And then finally, production apps like SQL and Oracle, because they need no latency, they need low latency, and compute and storage interact with each other. So we're going to do a deeper dive. Let me now turn it over to my colleague, Jim Steinbauer, Global Alliance Manager at Equinix, who manages the partnership with NetApp. So, Jim, good morning. I know that Equinix, falls in the co-location category, but you're much more than a co-location company. Can you talk about some of the things that you guys do differently that go beyond just providing space and power for a company's infrastructure?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I think a good place I'd like to start is just briefly explaining Equinix's history of being the peering point for the Internet, or providing the neutral locations that network providers have used over the past 20 years to physically connect to one another. Obviously, with the Internet being a network of networks, they required this type of location to establish a network edge node, if you will, that were physically connecting to all the other networks in the regions they wanted to do business in. And we were created as a company. Equinix stands for Equal Internet Exchange. We were created to provide these physical connections, these high-speed fiber cross-connects and Internet exchange services that made it easier for those networks to be able to communicate in what we call interconnect. So as we've all experienced the incredible growth of the Internet, it has allowed Equinix to grow into the largest data center provider in the world, with now over 190 facilities in 48 strategic markets. And, as the Internet grew, different types of Internet-based companies started to realize that establishing a presence within Equinix and interconnecting their services directly with the networks their customers were using provided them with a significant performance advantage. This has allowed many of the critical business ecosystems that make up our digital economy to grow and innovate. One of the fastest growing business ecosystems within Equinix over the past few years has become the public cloud service providers, such as AWS, Microsoft Azure, Google, and many others. These cloud providers are taking advantage of the network density within Equinix and the reason why we were created as a company, and establishing their own edge nodes in order to connect their services with their customers. This is creating some exciting new ways for enterprises that can, for allowing them to be able to incorporate the different advantages of public cloud into their IT infrastructure, which will be a big part of our discussion today, but it's creating a lot of very flexible options for customers.
So I'm taking away then two big things here. Your partner ecosystems, right? You got a lot of people pulling in there, and then the interconnections with the cloud providers. How does our topic here is compliance, security. How does Equinix fit into a company's security and compliance requirements?
Yeah, no, good question. And since Equinix is not necessarily a household name because of the customer base we've always had, it's a really good question, and it's actually at the core of our value proposition here. So, as I mentioned, the critical parts of the digital economy have been developing within Equinix over the past couple of decades. So, security compliance has always been a very important part of what we do for our customers. Each of our facility utilizes an array of security equipment, techniques, procedures to control, monitor, and record access to the facility, including individual customer cage areas as well. There are actually 7 layers of security that a person has to go through in order to make it into their cage, complete with guards at the entrance of our facilities there. So the security from a physical and access control perspective is second to none. We also maintain a comprehensive, always available power policy, complete with comprehensive redundancy and backup systems and generators. This enables us to provide an industry-leading availability to our customers as well, which, as you can imagine, if Equinix does go down or has trouble, that would disrupt the entire digital economy, which, quite frankly, we just can't let happen, right?
No, that sounds, it's consistent with what I know, Jim. And then, the title of your talk is It's All About Location. I've learned a lot about proximity and locating your data next to the cloud. What does that mean as it relates to using cloud services and how Equinix deploys cloud?
Yeah, sure. So some enterprises around the world have started to establish their own strategic presence within Equinix and their own strategic presence at the edge of these cloud service providers, if you will. This close proximity is allowing them to leverage all the advantages of cloud while still maintaining the security, control, and performance they required. Kind of what you were talking about in your introduction there. A good example of this is how customers are starting to replicate that data and be able to have it sit on NetApp private storage located at this edge and then interconnecting or cross-connecting over within the same 4 walls, right, and connecting that data to the Equinix Cloud Exchange, which is then connected to all the clouds. This allows them to have one large physical connection to that exchange, but establish logical connections to as many clouds that they would like and be able to make changes to these logical connections within minutes. And if you go to the next slide, go ahead.
I think the old way was physical cross-connects, right, that took weeks or at least time to get them provisioned?
Well, if you think about it, obviously as the internet was growing, if a large network provider needed to connect to every small internet service provider or network provider in every single region around the world, that's a heck of a lot of cross-connects there, right? So obviously we started utilizing Internet Exchange, which is one big physical port, and then logical connections, and that's exactly what we're doing here. So it's a really good story about what we've all been kind of experiencing over the last couple of decades of enabling the internet growth that is now allowing enterprises to now create a strategic presence at that edge in the same way and be able to relook at the way that they're designing their IT infrastructure. So obviously our global platform is allowing the cloud providers to deploy their edge nodes globally, which is creating more choice and creative hybrid cloud options for enterprises. And when you think about it, we are just doing for cloud exactly what we've always done as a company, providing interconnection locations that are enabling new and exciting ways to innovate.
No, I think and this kind of, you just highlighted why NetApp partners pretty much with Equinix for all of our, for these type of hybrid cloud solutions. It's the multiple cloud connections and then the global footprint. As a global company, we've got to serve customers all over the world, and having this kind of consistency makes a real big difference to be able to deliver to global clients.
Yeah, and just to mention, I forgot to mention that the 25, the big 25 there on the slide, obviously, is of our 48 markets, 25 of our markets have this cloud exchange capability, this fabric. So we're doing this at a global scale, and that not many enterprises really know that this is going on, but it is creating the momentum in the market globally and allowing the cloud market to really accelerate.
So those are the blue dots, right? The smaller blue dots on the map represent Cloud Exchange, right?
You got it. For instance, in 18 of our markets there, AWS Direct Connect edge nodes, if you will, are located in 18 of those markets, 21 for Microsoft.
Oh, very good. Well, any final thoughts on partnership, security, where Equinix fits into the big picture? I think it certainly is a logical conversation, and we've just had so much success deploying, common clients. It's been a good experience.
It certainly has. I think it's about who's stepping forward to really create options for customers and help educate customers, and I think that's why I'm excited about this call today. I think we've got two partners here today that are really taking and assembling very creative solutions for customers to be able to go take advantage of these environments.
No, that's a great lead-in, right? Because these are typically solutions that involve multiple components. It requires integration capabilities, different skill sets that connect traditional premise equipment to new age cloud environments. It's very different. So with that, I'd like to introduce BrightSky, one of our partners out of Canada, and Joey Harrison and Richard Lozier are two guests. Good morning, guys. Hey, Joey, you want to tell us a little bit about BrightSky and what your company does?
Absolutely, and thanks for letting us be here. BrightSky is a Canadian-only enterprise cloud. We were really born to tackle the needs of our sister company, Decisive Technologies, which is a company specializing in on-premise data center integration. As the cloud was being talked about more and more in Canada, we found that there was nothing really to address the enterprise customer. So with our team of architects, including experts in storage, compute, virtualization, networking, and especially security, we created BrightSky to address those unique issues around the enterprise. The fact that our growth was organic and was driven by the need to solve our customers' problem really allows us a unique perspective and gives our customers an advantage migrating into the cloud. We help to fortify on-premise infrastructure, which enables our customers to have the best experience utilizing various hybrid cloud models. At BrightSky, we offer backup as a service, DR as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, full managed services, and now we're proud to say we're the first and only NetApp Private Storage as a service and NetApp Private Storage hosted in BrightSky. We've got a growing distributed network of what we call pods hosted in Tier 3 data centers across Canada, and we're able to rapidly deploy new pods in locations that make sense in terms of data locality and services offering. This includes our new flagship pod in Equinix TR2 in Toronto, and our Equinix TR2 allows BrightSky to support our NPS workloads to Canadian customers.
Yeah, that was one of the things we wanted to have you talk about, Joey. It's kind of unique. You have data sovereignty laws in Canada. They're a little bit different. Can you explain the impact that has on these types of capabilities? I mean, customers want to use cloud, but their data can't leave the country. How are you able to do that?
Well, I'm sure that, like everyone, we're seeing more and more organizations going with cloud strategies. or at the very least being directed to take some serious steps towards it. For an enterprise level, everyone hears the cloud promises you all sorts of advantages, from scalability to lower cost, and yet you expect to have cloud choice. And really the goal of cloud should be to take advantage of that flexibility, scalability, and cost based on usage. But the other side of that coin is that I might lose my data security. I might lose my data locality or my data sovereignty, let alone I might find myself unsatisfied with a cloud service provider that isn't living up to their advertised commitment. With hidden costs, you can get out of control escalation on your prices, and now you can't even get your data out.
But no, all good points, and I think you might have covered some of this. But as a service provider, you get to look at lots of different customers, right? Not just your own. Just kind of highlighting what happened here. Oh, there we go. Just can you touch on some of these challenges? I think we all see them, but from your perspective, is this common? Is this different? What are you seeing as the big barriers to adopting cloud?
Well, the impact of data sovereignty laws in Canada really are one of the things that we see. And being in Canada, our experiences are obviously geared around our laws and the expectations of various clients we deal with. Because we're so closely tied to the United States, we really only have a thin line on the map dividing us. It sometimes gets forgotten that we're a different country and we have different laws and privacy issues. I know other countries like Germany have very strict data sovereignty and privacy legislation, but we find people that still sometimes confuse data privacy, data security, and data sovereignty. Data security deals with both physical and access protection of the data. That's where working with Equinix with their physical data centers and the security around them works very well with us. Now, data sovereignty, data security deals with both the physical. The access of the data should always be based on a need-to-know policy. The sovereignty, on the other hand, deals with data location, data residency, and legal governance issues. Because of these issues, it's somewhat difficult for Canadian companies to find the services they need and want and still remain compliant. The services tend to be hosted out of country. It becomes a challenge to find services that offer the performance, the scalability, and the choice and still remain legally compliant to the rules of your organization. Not every customer has the same compliance issues. Organizations in legal and finance have obvious regulations around personal and credit information. And when it comes to healthcare or government, their compliance may dictate that the information cannot even leave the province, meaning that one data center for our entire country wouldn't work. That's the benefit of our pod architecture. BrightSky can go where we're needed.
Oh, that's great, Joey, and thanks for the clarification. Security, sovereignty, privacy, right? They get lumped into one bucket, but they're measured differently. So, what have you for specifically on the compliance side? Oops, I think I missed one. I'm out of line here. Some of the drivers, I think you talked about data sovereignty. I touched on the others, but when you move past sovereignty, if I get that checkbox off my list, then, from users, they're trying to deploy real applications. Are you able to support that with that infrastructure?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the drivers and the opportunity that we see is tremendous. First and foremost, because we're allowing our customers choice. With BrightSky, our customers become agile. They can choose to run workloads in the various clouds for various reasons. If they want web scale, they can choose one hyperscaler. If they want to burn some credits, they might want to choose another hyperscaler. But really, it's keeping the data in BrightSky. We can assure that the data remains sovereign. Not to mention running workloads in BrightSky also has a distinct advantage because, as I said earlier, BrightSky was architected with enterprise workloads and security in mind from the very beginning.
No, that makes a lot of sense, right? If you start in the cloud, you tend to try to back into enterprise. It's difficult. If you start in the enterprise with those expectations, maybe you're able to meet them. So how are you guys doing that today? What is, from a compliance perspective, I think we covered this one, right? Oh, no, I believe you talked about it. Anything on, you mentioned the Canadian Digital Privacy Act. That's obviously very different. So the data doesn't leave Canada. Any other words of wisdom on this part of the conversation? And then we'll talk a little bit about the architecture.
Sorry, that the Canadian, I'm just looking at the slide that the Digital Privacy Act is not something that we have here in the U.S., right? You talked about that. Any other compliance-related ones, and we'll move on to the architecture. Well, how we do it maybe is how we deliver the services around compliance might be something appropriate. Because what we do is what we refer to as a white glove service. You know, we work very closely with our customers to create a cloud environment that meets their particular legal compliancy and data sovereignty concerns. Our customers are able to make the choices that best suit them. Based on our portal and our security layers, customers have tremendous insight into where their data and their workloads are as well. See, the visibility of this allows the customer to manage their own compliancy issues with all the logging and the records to back it up. What enables us to do this is by using our NetApp-based pod architecture. You know, inside the Equinix data center, we can connect directly to the Equinix Cloud Exchange. From there, our BrightSky portal can manage your workloads in various clouds, but keeping the actual data in Canada.
Oh, yeah, so that's the diagram here, right? So this is the Equinix. And what clouds do you currently have there? I know Azure and AWS. I think, is Google there yet? Are they coming?
Definitely, yeah. So this is actually Richard. So definitely we have AWS, Azure. Google is actually now available as well within our portal. And IBM Software is the one that's also coming as well.
Oh, that's good, Rich. And that portal access, right? So that's the bridge between your management layer, but giving customers access to the information so they can pull that. Is that real time, near real time, combination?
It's actually real time. Yeah, it's a real time.
Excellent. I'm just going to move past. We talked about these managed services. So what have you seen for a mix between customers that want to try to do this themselves versus, you know, being too difficult and not having the right skill set? Is there a leaning towards managing this environment? Or are you still seeing a lot of do-it-yourself type of engagements?
That's actually interesting because we end up seeing quite a few customers now that are starting to leverage more and more on the managed services side. They do less and less now. They want to focus more on the application side. You know, think about PaaS and above is what they want to start looking at. Even what we're seeing, a lot of our customers now are leveraging even more and more SaaS-based applications and trying to sort of divorce themselves from IT altogether. But that's really dependent on the different organizations.
Backup as a service is certainly a sweet spot. Customers, you know, they find that kind of cumbersome. They're either getting out of tape, that kind of stuff. They want to distance themselves from backup for sure because it dedicates a lot of time and effort to people that at the end of the day really aren't moving the business forward. They're just kind of keeping the business in place.
Yeah, we used to call backup as a server, backup at SunGard, taking out the trash, right? It's something you have to do on a regular basis. No one likes doing it, but if you don't do it, it's not a good situation. The other thing, your comment, Richard, we're seeing a lot of customers that now want to get out of the data center business. Either they're getting rid of one data center, typically their DR site, and because it needs to be remote from their headquarters, they tend to be interested in managed services. And even the propensity now to get rid of both data centers, right, and move into a colo or cloud-connected colo, that just seems to be a lot more prevalent now than it was even a year ago.
Yep, 100%. We're seeing the same thing, yep.
Hey, so any final thoughts, you know, on how to help customers and words of wisdom? I mean, you're obviously a service provider, but I think some of the things that you're doing externally, customers can do internally for their own clients. How did you enable this hybrid cloud?
Well, I guess we know the companies are all embracing technologies and services at a fairly rapid pace. We know the companies need to have the ability to use more than one provider for those services. So what we've done is allow choices for Canadians around a secure enterprise cloud experience that provides data sovereignty and insight into their data. keeping the data close to home is the key to managing that experience. And at the end of the day, what we want to do is give customers control of their cloud.
Well, that's the key, right? We're talking about control, security. You hit all the hot buttons, and the story is a good one. It makes sense. And it was very cool to watch you kind of go from idea to actually launching this piece of the service out of Toronto. So very exciting. Congratulations, and thank you guys for joining this conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
So with that, I want to turn the conversation to the 19001 group and Tom Puglisi. Hey, Tom, tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe a little bit about 1901, and then we'll dive into this cool federal law enforcement agency case study you have.
Sure. Thank you, Lee, and I appreciate you letting us present today. So 19001 Group is a FedRAMP authorized IT infrastructure managed service provider. We have a established FedRAMP operations center here in Virginia that supports a multi-tenant model. Our customers are both federal government and commercial entities, which are all supported out of this operations center, where we provide a number of managed services to them to run their IT infrastructure. As part of that offering, we have a tool platform that is part of our FedRAMP boundary, where we actually bring all the tools we need to do this. So our customers no longer have to worry about capital expenditures to buy licenses and refresh licenses. At the heart of our tool platform is ServiceNow as our ITSM system, and then we augment that with a number of different monitoring tools, patching tools, as well as a full service desk for tiers 1 through 3.
Hey, I heard the term FedRAMP before. What does that mean?
FedRAMP is an authorization accreditation that the federal government applies if a company wants to meet a certain FedRAMP authorization status. They will submit a package which shows how they meet all the requirements for the level they are applying to. The government then audits them through a third-party auditor, and then we need to keep that status to be re-audited every year, and so we're checked up on, validated, and make sure we keep that status and those controls for the security around that status in place.
Okay, so it's a pretty high bar, high standard then you have to meet.
It is, and it's the new standard in the federal government in the states these days.
All right. Well, that obviously ties into the story. Why don't we dive into this a little bit? What can you tell us about these guys without divulging who they are, but giving some good background on what they do and how you got into this cool project?
Yeah, sure. So what I'm about to present is an ongoing case study that we have with a Department of Justice customer here in the States. And let me just start with talking about how we kind of got to where we did very quickly. Over the last several decades, we've seen the market change, and basically when you talk about data center management and data centers as well as the security that goes around that, initially it started on site where people were buying boxes, putting them in their offices, maybe allocating a telco closet to rack and stack computers. Security was fairly easy. It was all right there on-premise used within the office. From there, it branched out to local data centers. So different agencies would stand up their own data centers and move all their equipment into that data center. They would be paying for the facility to host all of that, the equipment, the physical security around that. And then they've had dedicated network connections to there so the agencies could use the data. Again, security was fairly tight there because you could control the entire environment. And then today, in the last 5 years or so, we see the evolution of two main things. One is the commercial data centers like Equinix, which we heard about at the beginning here, where they actually stand up the facility and run it and then sell back space to customers. And then we saw the commercial cloud come around to fruition, and that's your Amazons and your Azures. So looking at that model, and we kind of looked at that model, we realized that as we got into our customer base, we had customers that we managed their equipment on site, and they had a need to go to the cloud. So we took our model from the management perspective and started to talk about how we could engineer them to get them into the cloud and into these private data centers that connect to the cloud. So with this particular DOJ customer, they want to do exactly that. They had a federal mandate to shut down a number of data centers. So they had to figure out what do we do, and their options were to move into one of two federal data centers, which they were not too keen about doing because they kind of lost a lot of control of what they did with their infrastructure. Or the second was to design a managed service which would leverage commercial entities such as the Equinix facility and AWS private public cloud arrangement. So that's kind of what this customer was looking for and what they contracted us to do.
Well, and that's why we thought, even though it's a federal government agency, the drivers that you talked about are ones that we hear in the commercial space all the time. And, you know, just to get to the end of the story, the fact that this solution, this hybrid cloud solution, meets the security requirements of a federal government agency should be good enough for most of the commercial customers. So that's why we like the parallel, right? Some of the acronyms you use are going to be very different, but the drivers and the journey are very similar. So what can you tell us about some of their specific challenges and things that you had to do to move from their old traditional environment to this new environment?
Sure. So our federal law enforcement customer had similar challenges that most of us have out there running infrastructure and IT environments for commercial or government entities. They had a lot of hardware end of life. They had a limited ability to support the mission needs that they were getting from their agencies from a technical perspective, as far as, you know, being able to spin up servers as quick as they needed. They had technology sprawl where they had so many projects using diverse technology stacks that was hard to maintain consistent technology management. And then they had the a burden of compliance. So as federal regulations changed, they were always on the hook for trying to figure out how to be compliant. So, you know, they had one arm that would audit the compliance, and the other arm that would have to actually ensure they were compliant. So they had a number of technical challenges on those respects. From the business perspective, they had similar things that we also see. They were trying to be more core focused in their mission. And that is to say, you know, if a customer who's doing a mission under our agency needs IT, we should be able to provide it instantaneously and not worry about that it's not in this budget cycle, or I don't have the funds right now. Can we wait a few months till I get them? So they needed a different model to operate as far as provisioning and procuring resources. They had CapEx dollars, capital expenditure dollar challenges, you know, trying to program for these big multi-million-dollar refreshes of their environments. And then the one that we like to talk about, Lee, is the data chain of custody. So being a law enforcement agency, they always had to know where their data was and be able to point back to actually physically where the data was. And this is important because while they wanted to embrace the cloud, it was tough for them to go all into the cloud because they couldn't afford to take all their law enforcement data and just put it out in Amazon or Azure. And not that it wouldn't be safe, but they didn't know where it was. They didn't know exactly what machines it was on and where it physically resided. And if they ever had to cancel that contract, were they sure they were getting that data back? So that was a big business challenge they had.
And these are criminal law cases and legal documents, right, that had to be shared between like hundreds of organizations or all over the country?
Yeah, without going into a lot of detail, these were legal documents. These were government law enforcement type documents, whether they be things for cases or whether they be things for accounting purposes for federal law enforcement. But yes, that's correct.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean you to divulge some secret information.
No problem. So that's basically the profile of our customer and what they were looking to do.
Well, good. And then, how did you address those? Like, tell us what the solution. First of all, I'm chuckling because we hear that's as data professionals, the challenges you brought up, both business and technical, to summarize every engagement we're in. So let's talk about what did the solution look like and and what were the phased approaches? How did you get there?
Sure. That's good. So we'll address it. We'll take the same step here. We'll look at the business solutions first. The first one was to move them to what we call an as-a-service model, which as a managed service provider is something 1901 does well. So by as-a-service model, what I mean is you want to buy your infrastructure as services. You want to do that with looking at your operational expenditure dollars, not your capital expenditure dollars. So how much does it cost me to run my mission on a day-to-day basis? You want to have that driven by a service catalog. You want to define service catalog that says, here are the things, here are the types of services I need to drive my mission. And then you want the quality of those services to be measured from a service level agreement perspective or key performance indicator perspective to show that my computers or my servers can be provisioned in a certain amount of time. They could be have uptimes of 99.9%. You don't want to measure that by, oh, I got 20 people on staff and that's what you paid for, and I got the 20 people on staff, therefore I'm meeting my, your objectives. So it's a little different way of looking at how you procure your infrastructure and the level you hold your service provider to. The second thing is a consumption-based pricing, and this goes to the OpEx model. You want to buy your services on a monthly basis. So if today I need 50 servers to do load testing, I want to be able to provision those fairly quickly. I want to spin them up for a month and pay for them, but then at the end of that test, I want to spin them down and not have that cost the following month. Now, contrast that to if I was on a capital expenditure, I actually have to find the money to actually buy that server, own that server, and even though it's only for a month, what do I do with it next? I got to find someone else to use it. So they provided a different model to this customer, and that's exactly what they're looking for in a consumption-based model. In this model, you're charged by the service, by how much you use it, and usually it could be hourly, it could be by the terabyte, it could be by the month, and that bill's given to the customer at the end of the month. And obviously it varies month to month based on the customer's usage, and it gives the CIO an ability to control that spending. Finally, on this business approach, we have something called a cost-neutral migration to the cloud. So to get them to the cloud, you want to take these first two bullets we talked about and implement them in your existing data center as best you can with a managed service provider and using a service catalog. We see that drives down your operation cost. You can take some of that typical operation cost and use that to seed seed money to drive you to your cloud migration costs that get you into the cloud. And now let's look at technically how we got this customer here. The services we use, the first one we call storage as a service, and for that we team with NetApp, and we use the NetApp data fabric to do that. What that meant is that we 1901 actually procures the physical NetApp devices. We stand those devices up and we own them, we manage them, and we sell that storage back to the customer at a per terabyte basis. So however many terabytes they need during that month, they're using it, they pay for that. Obviously, there's a minimum floor that they have to sign up for, but after that, it ebbs and flows to their needs. We're responsible for maintaining the storage. We're responsible for ensuring there's adequate growth in that storage, and the customer no longer has to worry about that as a capital expenditure. The second service is your cloud-based compute. So this is going to be your Amazon, GovCloud, Azure, those sorts of services. It's easy to take a credit card and to spin up one of these things, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about running production workloads in the cloud to manage them and to include them within a security posture that allows you to do that. So the foundation of this is working with the cloud service providers to take their catalogs and tailor that to what your customer needs are for provisioning service, not only servers and storage, but also other things like the marketplace. So they can buy F5 load balancers, or they can buy Microsoft SQL Server as they need it in the marketplace, spin it up for a month, and then spin it back down when they don't need it anymore. The third component of this is our commercial data center, and that's where Equinix comes into play here. So in our case, this is what ties our solution together, as we needed a hybrid cloud solution that allowed us to take our NetApp private storage that we're provisioning for this customer, put it in an Equinix data facility that we owned and controlled, and then use their Cloud Connect services to connect into an array of cloud service providers like GovCloud or Azure. So the way this looks is their data now is in the NPS in Equinix in a cage that is behind, physical Equinix security. It's under biometric security. It is encrypted, and then it's cross-connected to do the compute part in the cloud. At any given time, the government knows exactly where their data is. They can terminate our contract, and they have the right to claim all the disk shelves and destroy those disk shelves as they see fit. They can also run audits and come in and physically audit the storage as a service physical assets. And that's so the Equinix data center is what allows us to tie this all together and get that data into the cloud for compute, but still have the authoritative copy of that data in the Equinix facility. And the final step of this is our day 2 managed service, which is what Next-Gen 1 initially started for managing this entire platform, for handling the security requirements, the patching requirements, and just the ongoing operation and maintenance. So Lee, that in a nutshell, that's how we handle the business and the technical solution.
Oh, that is so thorough, Tom. Like I'm just going through my checklist of all the different areas where we've stumbled, customers have stumbled, and you hit all of them, right? Clearly part of the experience of having done this. So, for us, we often see this as a journey, right? This is a multi-phased approach. We hear customers say, I'm closing down a data center. It takes months, it takes a lot of time to get from there to where you are here. How long did it take, and what did that process look like?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And I'll take these components we just talked about and tell you how we implemented them in a nutshell here. So the path we traveled started with security.
Wrong way.
Yeah, my fault. Sorry, I clicked one too many times there. So the path we started with was security. So we knew security was going to be a long pole here, and we had to design that in early on, and that involved a number of things. So we as a FedRAMP service provider understand the security packages that you need to put together for FedRAMP authorization. We understand the security packages you need to put together for the federal government to receive what we call an ATO, an authority to operate. So we knew we had to leverage components from all our solution sets here. So we took our FedRAMP package and those security aspects. We took what Equinix offered from their security packages, and that includes things like their physical security, their biometrics, their CATV security, and all those items, and we rolled those into security packages. And then we took things like what Amazon had done with GovCloud and their security packages and their FISMA High controls that they've implemented, and we included that in our security packages. So we rolled all that into a master security package that we presented to the DOJ auditors to review and identify gaps, at which point the controls that were gaps, we then addressed how to close those controls. So that handles how we got that whole environment to a place where we got an ATO from a security perspective. That took us about 4 months, which is actually pretty quick for the federal government, and leveraging our partners and what they've done, we were able to do that in a 4-month period with a customer who was willing to help us get through that. Then from there, we rolled this out by deploying the managed service of their existing data center. So we put our tool stack, our FedRAMP Operations Center into play to manage their existing environment. We understood the environment at that point, and then we started to focus on moving their data. The first thing we did is we focused on disaster recovery of the data because that's the low-hanging fruit. We moved the data onto the NetApps, and then we took the NetApps and we put them geographically across the country. So one was located in our Equinix facility in Seattle, one was located in the East Coast. And that gave us the foundation now where the data is established, it's replicating, and then you can then cross-connect that into the cloud. We then built out our cloud. In this case, we used GovCloud for AWS, so that was our first target cloud. Although I would like to point out with this architecture, since the data is resident in Equinix, you can cross-connect that to any cloud, which is something the customer liked. So we then started migrating the low-hanging fruit applications, things that migrate into the cloud easily. and we use technology to do that, put the application in the cloud, we cross-connected it back to its data in Equinix, and then we started running production workloads. The last thing we did here is refactoring any applications that were not cloud ready. So every customer has legacy applications. In this customer's case, it was things running on Sun, Spark, Solaris with old versions, which obviously is going to go to the cloud. So we had to do a little bit of refactoring those applications. We're in the process of doing that now. And then those would follow the same path to migrate into GovCloud and then cross-connect to their data once they're refactored. And then the final step in this is we put this all under the day 2 operations of our FedRAMP managed service, and this is the same FedRAMP managed service that we started with in the beginning in the regular data center. So all we're doing now is we're just porting that FedRAMP service to the cloud. And that's sort of the path we're in the process of traveling.
Yeah, so the interesting takeaway for me here is you started with security. Like our typical path is we work with IT, and then the chief compliance officer, the chief security officer comes in and kills it because it hasn't been signed off by the guys that control the data, right? So starting there, you got the check boxes. I assume that made the rest of the process a little bit easier, knowing you had that buy-off?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, that was a non-starter, right? So if we couldn't get that buy-off, we weren't going to be able to move forward with the program.
Yeah. No, that's it. It's a non-starter. Hey, we're a little tight on time. Can you want to go to your picture? I like the I think that the picture really is
absolutely. Yeah. So just finally, we turned DR into production. Once we did that, and then we're going to stand up another DR site that looks just like the one we did, and we're going to close their data center. At the end, you have a final architecture where we have 2 Equinix established data centers that host our private storage NetApp facilities. We're using NetApp ONTAP in the cloud for temporary storage for high volume applications, such as database applications, and then we're managing all that out of our managed service. So that's the final architecture, Lee. And in closing, key takeaways, it's an incremental journey. So it's not a big bang, even though you hear about that sometimes. Consumption-based models, what you want to look at. You want to look at using as-a-services for storage infrastructure and platform management. And we use DR as our low-hanging fruit, and then moved applications into the DR environment and transferred that into production.
I think that's great advice. It was fascinating that you started on-prem, right? That building the cloud journey, you started on-prem, migration, then DR, and finally to cloud. It's just good to hear that, right? Because it's a lot of steps, but they seem very linear, and you've broken them down, so it seemed to obviously work for you guys.
Yeah, it's going well. We're probably 3/4 of the way there. They are running production workloads in the cloud now, and we're getting those final applications up there.
Well, I'm just going to summarize then. Hey, Pete Deacon, I'm going to turn it over to you in a minute. We got a few minutes left for questions. But one other thing I liked about Tom is that he used a lot of cloud terminology, consumption-based pricing, as a service, service catalogs. Those tend to be the complicated parts of doing these deployments, right? So hopefully through, the couple of examples, we've demonstrated how you can leverage cloud infrastructure but still address data security, data control, data compliance, right? You can keep data private in your own environment and be connected through high speed to the cloud so you can deliver low latency to your end users. Mr. Deacon, what do you have from us from the audience? We'll see if we can wrap it up with a couple of questions.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. There's only a couple in the room, and I've taken the liberty of putting a couple together that we hear quite often from clients that I thought the audience might be interested in. So one of them that comes in asks about if we have a service to actually review current applications, architecture, and solutions that to ensure that they meet regulatory compliance. So are there services that 1901 or NetApp or BrightSky or even Equinix offer that would enable customers to ensure that the current applications, architecture, or solutions meet compliance requirements?
Ooh, good one.
Lee, I mean, from the NetApp side, we do have cloud workshops that enable you to identify the most effective loads to move to a cloud platform. So that is sort of how NetApp would do it. And of course, part of that discussion would be around the regulatory compliance that you might be tied to. So, yeah. Folks at BrightSky are at 1901. Any comments you can share?
From the 1901 side, we do a discovery activity that we assess the security level of those applications to figure out, based on the FISMA classification, where they can be put and what security controls would have to go around them. So we do that in the discovery phase.
Thanks.
Actually, this is actually Richard from BrightSky. We have a similar approach where we do our cloud assessment, and that's when we look at the different applications that are actually being used by the customer and go through a fairly thorough examination of those applications by understanding what they are and how they're actually utilized. And then from there, we can actually architect a solution around them to know and meet all of those criteria as well as compliance and sovereignty issues they might have.
Great. Thanks, guys. Good answers. From the Equinix side, anything you'd like to comment on there as far as certs you may have that enable you to meet those types of requirements?
Well, we meet all the physical and interconnection requirements there. I think what we do is rely on our wonderful partners, such as these, to be able to actually bring it together and put it into a bundled package and make it easy to consume.
Excellent. Well, I think Tom alluded to it earlier, just on the security piece, that I've heard it described as layers of an onion, right? That Equinix provides a few of the layers. The provider, the service provider, provides their layers as well. NetApp has our own security and capabilities. So you're right, it's the solution provider that's going to look at the whole picture. And I think, Tom, you described that pretty well, of how all the pieces come together and you're able to deliver that as a service.
Thanks. So one of the things that we get asked quite often is, of course, clients want to avoid vendor lock-in. And the question around being able to access multiple vendors with this NetApp private storage solution. I mean, can you only connect to one of these hyperscalers at a time, or can you connect to multiple at a time? How does that work with NPS? I don't know, Lee, if you want to take that one.
I might pass that one off to Richard, right? Because I know what the PowerPoint does, but I'd like to hear it from guys that have actually done it.
Perfect.
That's more valuable.
Yeah, so this is Richard. So absolutely. The great thing about the Cloud Exchange when you're connecting into the Equinix data center is you have the ability now to leverage those multiple clouds. So no, it's actually fantastic. It gives also that customer, like it's been mentioned a couple of times now on this webinar, that you're giving that customer all of that choice because you're trying to avoid that vendor lock-in. So the customer, by having that choice, can actually now all of a sudden, some of these different providers are going to have different security capabilities, and you can leverage those based on the different providers. So having that Cloud Exchange has actually been a great thing for BrightSky to make sure that we can offer that to our customers.
Hey, Jim, this might be for you, but the thing about moving data into the cloud, we all talked about is easy. Getting your data back is hard, and getting your data back can be expensive. How does Cloud Exchange address some of the egress costs of pulling data back when you change your mind or you want stuff to on-prem?
Yeah, well, I think the data location overall is what drives that. Being able to have your data reside privately in NetApp private storage in an Equinix facility, but leverage and allow that data to go in, but it never resides in this model in the cloud. It's actually just using the flexible computer, the other services there. So that gives you options, and you don't have to actually try to bring it out. If you're bringing the data out that you've stored inside the public cloud, it can be time-consuming and very costly because it's not it might be free to get it in there, but it's not free to get it out because there's an egress charge as you're bringing out all of that data. So it provides options to you. It also provides a cost benefit because the more transactions you do, if you actually have your data stored in the cloud, there's going to be an egress and an ingress charge. There are going to be two charges, whereas obviously if you're in having your data there privately, you're not having to charge to access that data. You own that data and it's on your private storage. So there's different models for different scenarios there, but if it's going to be heavy utilization and you want to be able to have that avoid the cloud lock-in and have flexibility, that Cloud Exchange really provides that flexibility to be able to take advantage of multiple clouds.
Hey, Pete, we're at the top of the hour. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I think you guys have covered it, and I think we want to be respectful of the audience's time. So I'll let you close up.
Well, great. Thanks very much, first of all, for everybody's time, for our presenters. We tried to provide a variety of perspective on the similar topic around addressing security and control of your data in the hybrid cloud. Hopefully some lessons learned and some information that you can use in the future. We're going to continue to do these once a month. Next month, we're going to have NetApp IT talk about how they use Equinix, NetApp, how we use our own technology, both our storage, our software, and Equinix partnership to address both our production applications as well as our development environment. These guys have a lot of firsthand experience and I think some good advice to offer our audience. Thanks very much.
Lee, before you close, could you just add one note as to if those that are with us would like to gain more information on what they saw today, who would they reach out to?
Oh yeah, let's see. In the slide decks, there are contacts for each of the, Jim Steinbauer has his email for Equinix. Sarah, did you reach out? How do we want to handle NetApp? Do you want to take those or should I take them? I have my email in there as well. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely. In the presenter screen, too, you can look at and reach out to me. My name is Sarah Stinson. I just sent it on the audience an announcement on how to reach us.
Good question. Each of the sections does have an email address and a couple of contacts. If you want more information on anything you heard, please download a copy of the deck and reach out to any one of us. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks again, folks. Have a good rest of your week and hope to see you next month.